Yo, what's happening, YouTube? Afro Cuban here, and we are back with another episode of what my DC movie universe would be like. Now, as you all know, this is the series that I've created where I hypothetically reboot and rewrite the DC universe and explain which movies I will put out and break down the details and the plot of each of my movies. All right, so getting right into it. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to start labeling my videos by parts again. So this way, nobody doesn't get confused on which movie comes before which, or get confused about the order of the storylines that's taking place. Um, yeah, so with that being said, I guess this would be Phase 2, part 3. This is basically taking place right after the death of Superman. Uh, all right, so next up, we're going to be getting our Green Lantern sequel. And in this sequel, we will introduce and focus primarily on John Stewart. And this movie is going to be a simple, straight to the point, personal story for John. All right, so basically, to start it off, Hal Jordan, he's still the current Green Lantern. But remember, he's retired now and he wishes to live a normal life. So he's been back on Earth for a few weeks now, and a new successor is needed now more than ever. The death of Superman has left Earth very vulnerable, so Hal decides to quickly find his replacement. Okay, so this leads us into Act 1. We're introduced to some military cadets. They're on break from a recent tour and they're at a bar blowing off steam. They're drinking, they're laughing, cursing, having a good time. But then a bar fight breaks out between the soldiers and some local town thugs. It's a big brawl, everyone is tussling and throwing each other around, but then a blonde haired woman steps in and breaks it up. She pushes the guys back and tells them to sit down and relax. They all listen because apparently this is their officer in command, Lieutenant Leslie Williams. And at her side is her best friend and longtime colleague, Colonel John Stewart. They both give a long speech to the soldiers about respect and maturity. And as they're talking, one of the locals, tries to sneak up behind Leslie with a pool stick. And right before he can swing it and hit her, John intervenes and displays some impressive military combat. He grabs the pool stick and snaps it in half. Then he breaks the guy's arm and kicks him across the room. And while all of this is going on, Hal Jordan just so happens to be in the bar also, and he witnesses everything. He's known John since he was a kid. So John comes over to say hello, and the two of them talk and catch up. Now, like I said, this movie is simple and straight to the point. It's a personal story for John, so I won't go into specific details and flesh out each act like I normally do. I'll just give the basic gist of what's going on to keep the video short. So basically, long story short, in Act 2 of the movie, the soldiers and the lieutenant and John Stewart, they all return to base and they ship out on their next tour. So now they're in a foreign desert on patrol. But then they get into a gunfight with some enemy soldiers. This is where we get an explosive action scene. And during this gunfight, the lieutenant, Leslie, is captured by some of the enemy soldiers and she's taken back to an abandoned lab and tortured for information, but she doesn't give in. She resists the torture for as long as she can until they eventually kill her, or so they think. They have her strapped to an electric chair that's hooked up to different chemicals and machines, and they electrocute her until the machines and chemicals all explode. So now electrified smoke fills the room and the soldiers are unable to see. And when the smoke clears, her body is gone. The enemy soldiers are searching for her body to make sure they finish the job, but there's no sign of her. Then, out of nowhere, blue lightning starts crackling throughout the lab, and she slowly begins to materialize from thin air. Her flesh and molecules are all made up of static, and she seems to be some kind of living energy. She uses this new power to electrocute and kill all of the soldiers. And when the dust finally clears, she steps out and she is now revealed to be the new supervillain, Livewire. Now, sidebar. I know Livewire is mainly a Superman villain, but to be honest, I don't know any popular mainstream villains for John Stewart's Green Lantern. So for my universe, I'll retcon her origin and make her the villain for his movie. I mean, a DC villain is still a DC villain, right? All right, so getting back to the story, back at the army base, Leslie is presumed dead, and the soldiers mourn her and even have a funeral. John is taking it especially hard because she was his best friend and the one who trained him. So now we fast forward a few weeks. John returns home from duty, and he's just going about living his normal life. Uh, One day he's with Hal, and the two of them are at a cell phone store. John is helping Hal pick out a new cell phone because Hal is not really hip to all of the new technology, seeing as he's been off planet for over 20 years. So while they're in the store, the lights begin to flicker and go dark. All of the cell phones and tablets and computers begin to lift up and float in the air. And Livewire materializes and begins absorbing the energy from every electronic device. John is shocked to see his old friend and calls out to her, "Leslie, what the hell? What the hell happened to you?" She pauses and stares at him for a few seconds, but then she shocks him and knocks him back against the wall. This new superpower seems to have corrupted her morality. She now only craves to absorb all energy and destroy anything that tries to stop her. And the more power she absorbs, the more of her humanity she loses. So now Hal suits up and he transforms into the Green Lantern. And he gets into a fight with Livewire. But Hal is rusty and slow because of his age, so eventually Livewire gets the better of him and knocks him out. Then she dematerializes and disappears. Her energy force is sucked into the TV screen and she escapes. So now we get into Act 3. John carries Hal back to his place. Hal is beat up real bad, unable to go after Livewire. So Hal makes the decision to give John the ring. He's known John since he was a kid, and he knows that John has a good heart and a strong will. Hal gives a speech about protecting not only Earth, but every living being in the cosmos, and John finally dons the ring. A bright green flash of light shines throughout the apartment as John is consumed in his new Green Lantern costume. He begins hearing voices from all of the previous lanterns, and together they repeat the lantern oath. "And bright as day, and black as night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light." John has now accepted his fate as the new lantern and protector of innocence as he flies off to face his old friend. Meanwhile, Livewire is attacking a power plant and absorbing its energy. And the more energy she absorbs, the more she is fueled with rage and loses her humanity. So when John finally arrives, at first he tries to talk her down, but she immediately attacks him and they get into a huge epic battle. The fight is explosive and goes on for a while, and eventually John is able to pin her down using the power of the ring, and he's trying to talk some sense into her, but she's just resisting and still trying to attack him. So the fight continues for a while longer, and the two of them are practically evenly matched. So John uses his brain and realizes that the power plant is over a dam, and when water is conducted by electricity, it short circuits and loses power. So now the fight finally reaches its climax. John uses his ring to carry the water from the dam beneath the plant and dumps all of the water on top of Livewire. Water is apparently her main weakness, so she screams in agony and begins to fry and short circuit. And then she apparently returns to normal and passes out. The fight is finally over. For now. So now it's a big scene. There's news choppers, and finally the police and SWAT team all arrive to take her away. But then, right as she's about to be put into a police van, a bunch of black SUVs show up to the scene. And in the front of the convoy, out comes Amanda Waller. She's now head of a superhuman housing facility called Cadmus. She orders the police to stand down and hand Leslie over. They strap Leslie into a giant metal tube and put her into the back of one of the SUVs. And just before the door closes, we get a quick look at Leslie's eyes. There's an electrical static crackling in her eyes, and she smirks, hinting that this isn't the last that we're going to see of her. She has tasted true power, and now she will forever crave more. The SUVs all drive off, and the screen cuts to black. And now we get to the end of the movie and we get a final epilogue montage where we see John Stewart. He's enjoying his new powers. He's smiling and laughing as he flies over the clouds and soars into space. Then we cut to a coffee shop where we see Hal Jordan. He's still banged up. His arm is in a sling and his face is black and blue. But he's reading a newspaper. The cover reads, "A new Emerald Hero emerges," with a photo of John as Green Lantern. We then zoom in on Hal, and he has a huge smile on his face. And the screen cuts to black, and the movie ends there. Okay, guys, so that right there is what my DC Universe Green Lantern sequel will basically be. And like I said, I know Livewire is primarily a Superman villain in the comics, but for the sake of this movie and my lack of knowledge of Green Lantern villains, I decided to retcon her origin in order to make her a John Stewart villain. You see, I introduced her in the beginning to be a military colleague of John and a good friend. But then she dies in a freak accident and gets brought back, and she's fueled by rage and power. I also tried to give a backstory to Hal and John. Hal being an older veteran, I wanted to make him a somewhat mentor or father figure to John. So it doesn't seem like he just gave the ring to John for no reason. I wanted to make the trust and responsibility between them seem genuine. A true passing of the torch. Now, if you made it this far and you enjoy listening to my hypothetical synopsis, leave a like or a comment. And if you have any issues or found any plot holes in my story, let me know in the comments as well. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.